UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful morning, the Friday, 2nd of January 2026. I almost forgot and said 2025, but it is 2026. It's a beautiful, bright and sunny morning down here in Kampala, where I do come to you live from. And I wish to say thank you to all our new community members, the usual suspects, the semi-regular suspects, and every single one of you that dedicates their time to watch whatever we do. Those who watch us in real time, those who watch our broadcast much later when they've been wrapped up, those who watch our shots every time we put out a shot. We've not put out a pre-recorded video in a bit, but yeah, we'll be looking forward to making more of those in the coming days or in the turn of the new year. So yeah, please bear with us on that front. So, and then there's a lot of ideas that are floating around that we wish to implement, only that the circumstances or the situations have not yet permitted us to implement those. Today we'll be discussing who will be Enzo Maresca's replacement now that he's part ways with Chelsea. We'll be looking at the AFCON 2025 as it is set to get underway for the round of 16. That will be tomorrow. And then we'll also be discussing Manchester City there did drop points yesterday in their fixture against Sunderland. We'll talk about Liverpool in the same spirit or regard, as well as the other games that were played on the day. So apologies on that. Meanwhile, so that will be the gist of our conversation this beautiful morning. It's 10:15 a.m. as we do come to you live from Kampala, Uganda. I don't know what time it is for you, but I hope the sun is out. I know winter is on for many of you, for our friends in Europe. But I hope you find a way to enjoy the cold weather. I do not know if you ever get used to it, because sometimes we never get used to certain parts or certain moments in the year, depending. But yeah, it is what it is. Special shout outs to you, Pedri, thank you for making last evening's conversation worthwhile. Thank you so much, Pressing Kosi from South Africa. Thank you so much, LFC from the UK, and every single one of you that is a regular on this channel. We do appreciate what you do for us, being part of these conversations and helping to expound on our conversations and debates. Yesterday, Pedro was asking me for an update on some of our numbers as we drive towards, hoping to monetize this channel and help it continue to grow. So really, okay. So I'll be hoping that that I can provide him an update on that. But yeah, I've only had about what? Slightly over 290 hours of watch time in the previous 1 month, which is still low. It's still low. If we are talking about monthly averages, that is still a bit low. But we hope we can continue to improve slowly by slowly as we go through, our different conversations. Of course, we had a slight dip because there were days when we did not shoot, so that partly affected, that in terms of watch time. But anyways, I will drop that to the side and kick things off with the conversation this morning. Like I said, the AFCON round of 16 gets underway tomorrow when Senegal take on Sudan at 7 p.m. East African time, while Mali will be taking on Tunisia. Now, for the round of 16, we'll only be having 2 games per day. So that is what will happen. So starting Saturday until Tuesday, expect 2 games per day at 7 p.m. East African time and at 10 p.m. East African time for the respective days for the round of 16. And after the round of 16, the tournament will take a 2 days break for Wednesday and Thursday before returning on a Friday for the quarterfinals. That's how the schedule has been set. So Senegal up against Sudan at 7 p.m. tomorrow, and then Mali up against Tunisia tomorrow. Morocco on Sunday against Tunisia, while South Africa will be in a big encounter between the five-time champions, the indomitable Lions of Cameroon, up against, the Bafana Bafana there, who are one-time champions of the AFCON there, having won it in 1996. Realized Cameroon's last win came in 2017. So, and then on Monday, we'll have Egypt against Benin at 7 p.m., while Mozambique will take on Nigeria at 10 p.m. And then to wrap things up on Tuesday, Algeria will be up against DRC Congo, while Ivory Coast will take on Burkina Faso. So all that action will be getting underway quickly, very, very soon, starting tomorrow. Anyways, quickly to the Premier League, where Manchester City dropped points in their goalless draw against Sunderland. For the first time in as long as I can't remember, I witnessed 3 goalless draws. I mean, there's been so many draws on match day 19, if we're being fair. We had Chelsea 2-2 draw against Bournemouth. We had West Ham 2-2 draw against Brighton. We had a 1-1 draw between Manchester United and Wolverhampton Wanderers. We had a 1-1 draw between Crystal Palace and Fulham, which was a perfect score prediction for us, by the way. Liverpool in a goalless draw against Leeds. Brentford in a goalless draw against Tottenham Hotspur. Of course, for all those, we failed our predictions. And a goalless draw between Manchester City and Sunderland. That means only 3 teams won their games on match day 19. I do not remember the last time we had that many draws on a given match day. But also, the lack of goals. Were teams too defensive, or were teams too conservative in their play that they did not explore, that they did not create chances? Now, for the game between Manchester City and Sunderland, it couldn't be more different, because it was a game of so many chances created, none converted. That was the case of that game. For those of you that managed to catch it, it was not a boring goalless draw. It was a goalless draw that put you on the edge. So many saves from goalkeepers, so many close calls, so many blocks. The intricacies, Jeremy Doku, oh my God. There's a moment, I think particularly in the second half, where he dribbles past almost everyone, and as he gets in his final shot, which I thought was going to hit the target and possibly beating Rufis, the Sunderland goalkeeper, and then in the last minute gossip, a Sunderland player gets his head to it. In fact, it didn't feel like the player headed the ball. It felt like more the ball smacked the player's head. That's how close it was. Manchester City hit the upright at some point. And like I said, it was not a boring draw. It was a very entertaining goalless draw. Depending on what side you are rooting for, Brian Checky was voted man of the match. Usually for me, when it's a goalless draw, and given how dominant Manchester City was, as boring as it sounds for me to talk about these things of XG, because I find them sometimes misleading, but Manchester City had it better, as you would have expected. That's why my prediction had been that they would win by 2-1. I thought Sunderland would collapse for the first time this season at the Stadium of Light, but they played 10 games at the Stadium of Light and they've lost none. They have a couple of draws in there. They have a couple of victories in there. So they've had as many as, I think, 5 victories, a 3-0 against West Ham on the opening day, a 2-1 win against Brentford, a 2-0 victory against Wolverhampton Wanderers, a 3-2 victory against FC Bournemouth, and a 1-0 win over Newcastle. The 5 draws have come against Aston Villa, against Everton, all in a 1-1 draw, a 2-1 draw against Arsenal, a 1-1 draw against Leeds United, and a goalless draw against Manchester City. So that's how impressive they have been from home. And whereas there's so many players in that Sunderland squad that deserve their praises, I cannot get over Granit Xhaka. I mean, the kind of leadership he's offered that team, the kind of grit he gives in terms of leading by example, because he's not just this vocal captain who keeps commanding players to be here and there. He's the kind of captain who, when it comes to the press, and the attack, and the grit of the game leads by example. And he does it as he commands others to do the same. He keeps that team in shape. He carries the manager's commands into execution on the turf, and he's been really, really impressive. Sunderland had 10 shots on goal, as Manchester City had 14. 4 of each were on target for either side. 5 corners for Man City and 3 for Sunderland. 4 saves from the respective goalkeepers or in that game. But the amount of blocks that must have been registered in that game might have been really enormous. I found it a very, very entertaining goalless draw, in my opinion. As the game wore on, I thought it did feel like, because Sunderland were treated to a barrage of attacks. It was attack after attack. Manchester City kept coming, and it felt like anytime then they could score. And I did not feel that Sunderland would have deserved a defeat given how they play. And we're talking about a Sunderland side who have had many players away for AFCON, But somehow they found the fight in them to, still earn a point. Rofi's in goal, Mukele Aderelete in the centre back, Skin, and then Hume, Granjaka, Getruda. Good morning, Pedri. Are you sure Josko Vardiol is a defender at this point? I mean, I do not know. The way he tried to flick that ball without facing the goal with a defender in his frame was something that I found really, really interesting. Was something that I found quite spectacular in that particular move. Yeah, he nearly scored 3, but that moment, with the way he tries to flick on that ball, not directly, but almost indirectly, because he has a defender to the side. He's not directly facing goal, and it's more like a side flip of the ball on the side of his boot, and that ball goes on to, I think, kiss the outside of the upright. It was really, really impressive, that moment. And there was, like I said, there were so many close calls in that game. There were so many close calls in that game. It would have been a Puskas award. I mean, given that the season is still raging on, we do not know if one would have scored a more beautiful goal, but we do expect some beautiful goals to come. But if that goal were to go in, definitely it was going to be one of the contenders. I mean, the way for me it was a blinder. It feels like the kind of thing that a very towering Zlatan Ibrahimovic could pull off. Something that a Lionel Messi should be trying to pull off, because he is that skilled. In other words, you'd expect that of a forward, of a striker, maybe to conjure something up like that. But for a defender to get in that position, because it's not like it was a moment of set-piece play that you had committed defenders up front, but somehow he found himself there and he was challenging for this ball, He was challenging for this ball. And I found that really, really interesting, Yes, Olivier Giroud type as well. Exactly. That in the moment itself, I watched it. First of all, I was wondering how he had managed to flick that ball. And then I get to watch the replay multiple times, and I'm like, oh boy, how sweet that would have been. I wasn't rooting for Manchester City, if we are being honest. The Arsenal fan in me, very late on in the game, came out and was rooting for Sunderland to force a draw at least, or even to later on go and force, a victory, and City dropped all 3 points. But in the end, it was 2 points dropped for both sides. But that moment itself, that's where then the football fan in me, who prioritizes football, that then would have relished the moment to say, yes, that is the kind of moment that makes a difference in this kind of game to eventually win you the game. But unfortunately for Josko Vardiol, it wasn't perfectly put on target. But very, very beautiful moment there. So Simon Adingra, I thought, had a Mayenda, Leafy, Broby. I mean, it was the kind of game that it was all about grit for Sunderland because they did not have much of the ball. They had to defend really, really deep. I liked that they remained very organized. I liked that every moment that you thought Manchester City had a half space to take aim at goal, somehow, somewhere, you would have a Sunderland player throw their body in, and then you would have a block, and then they would clear, sometimes not so far away. They forced Manchester City as the game wore on to commit some fouls in and around their own half. That's for Sunderland, and then to sort of relax the tensions within the game, because usually when you're a team like Sunderland in that kind of position, every foul that you win is a moment that you get to breathe again, a moment you get to sort of take a sigh of relief and then reorganize yourselves and then go again. You could see Regis Libris on the touchline there trying to charge his team at very well knowing that the game was not yet over, that even though they had managed to hold City until that point, they could not let anything to chance. They themselves tried to go forward and failed to convert. Did you realize on Sky Sports YouTube channel their highlights videos? If it is Arsenal, they make it seem that Arsenal barely win any game. A realist, if City wins 2-1, they focus on the good, not the bad. Look at it. It's very biased. Yes, we spoke about this. Happy New Year, Tester of Life. Tester of Life rejoins us. He's an Arsenal fan from South Africa who hasn't been with us in a very, very long time, in a couple of months, must I say. But it's good to have you back. Happy New Year to you too. I hope you had a great Christmas, and may this year be a great one for you and for your family. Thank you so much. I wish you the same. I hope in your absence that you are doing okay. I hope it is work or school or whatever other life commitments that kept you away, that you stayed good and that you are all well with your family. So thank you for that. So back to the comment from Pedri. Yes, Pedri, I certainly agree with you. I think it happened in the aftermath of Arsenal's 2-1 victory over Brighton. Really, Manchester City beat up against Nottingham Forest by a similar scoreline. And by their own editorials, they made it appear. Of course, they praised Ryan Chucky for the right reasons, perhaps. These are games that I did not watch live. I managed to catch the highlights of which. So now, it makes you feel that Manchester City were very dominant. But based on the highlights I saw, Arsenal in the game, in their win against Brighton, were more dominant than Manchester City were against Nottingham Forest. And yet, if you are to judge those games by those headlines, then it creates the reversal of the impression of the very picture, Pedro, how are you, man? Good, thanks. What about you? Good boy, Tessa. So, yeah, so I completely understand, because if Arsenal had been clinical in that Brighton game, they would have even scored 5. But because they were not clinical enough, and credit to Brighton, they put in some blocks. For example, there's a moment where the cutback comes in for Martin Odegaard, and as he goes direct for a shot, a Brighton player blocks in, dives in for a block. Brilliant block. Then you had somewhere again towards the tail end of the game, you had Saka miss a chance. You had Gabriel Martinelli miss a chance. So if Arsenal had been clinical, they would have scored 4 or 5. And I kept saying this after their game against Wolverhampton Wanderers, I think, when they played against Everton and won that game by 0-0, it's not like they did not create chances. They created chances to score more. They were just not clinical. And the same thing happened against Brighton. And I said, sooner or later, Arsenal will score more if they can be clinical. And then we saw that, come out against Aston Villa when they went on to score 4. Again, they could have scored 5, and that's how good they were. So then for Manchester City against Nottingham Forest, who needed a late goal in the 83rd minute, of course, through Ryan Chucky, Nottingham Forest, they themselves had some really close calls in that game. But they kind of picture that Sky Sport painted was as such that, as though Manchester City were all over Nottingham Forest all throughout the game, which 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 wasn't really the case, you know. So, but yeah, that bit of biased reporting, I do not know. Oftentimes, I want to be the good guy in me wants to think, oh, it's all about clickbaits and stuff like that. But when you see them carry on that narrative onto TV, live TV, and in analysis, it tells you the kind of, I don't know, is it gaslighting? I don't know if they're trying to cause some bit of rage amongst Arsenal fans or reaction or what, but they do that very often, you know, that when Arsenal does something, it's put into a certain context than if the same thing would have been done by a different team, you know. So I've observed that. I'm doing good, just been really busy on my side. I've been scarce, but I will be back more often now. Work is keeping me on my toes. We wish you the best of luck in your respective hustles, tester of life. In any case, any of us who are hustlers out there, we know that sometimes work will rob you out of so many other things that you have loved to do. I, for one, sometimes I get here late, and it's particularly because other duties have taken me away. Tribe, does Uganda have a traditional celebration for entering a new year? Not really. What we have as tradition is we have we have an annual festival by the Buganda Kingdom, which is called Enkuka. So that's an annual event. But largely in Uganda, how people cross into the new year, that's the 31st into first, is a lot of people go for such events, parties and festivals in the form of music concerts, and then you have a lot of people spend their time, their nights in churches, praying, crossing from one year to another, and then you have some of us who stay behind closed doors at home to ourselves. But and then at midnight you have fireworks being blasted in the skies in many parts of the capital. So basically, that's how people mark, the beginning of the new year, and obviously the end of the other. So that's what would pass for tradition, but there's nothing more than that. What do you do for work? Fireworks in Uganda this year was so bad. Why are you getting that, Pedri? It was so bad based on what, or compared to what? There are limitations to who is allowed to, blast fireworks. That's for starters. Two, as big as the fireworks are, it's not going to be as explosive as you'd have it in Tokyo or in Dubai or in China. That's another case. But maybe there's some bit of chaotic scenes in Kasese. I do not know what exactly happened, but it felt like fireworks was running in all sorts of directions at the time, based on a clip that I watched. But I don't want to think it was chaotic or it was bad. Kenya was the best one in Africa. Pedri, did you really observe the entirety of Africa? I do not know. But anyway, it is your opinion. I'm a store manager, and you, yeah. Isn't it tester of life who told us he was working with his dad at a store? I think it was him. Are there Muslims in Uganda, or is it only Christians? Oh, they're Muslims, very many Muslims. Our former president, Field Marshal Idi Amin Dada, was a Muslim, and he was a close friend to Muammar Gaddafi. We have one of the biggest mosques in Central Africa, or in Eastern and Central Africa, one of the biggest. That's the old Kampala Mosque. They have their base in Kibuli. That's where the Muslims are best. So there's a large Muslim community in Uganda, but of course, the Christians are more. Students, okay. Here in South Africa, there was a lot of restrictions because of the animals and wildlife for safety. So not much fireworks, but there were fireworks shows. I completely understand. Even as they try to restrict as much, first of all, you have to secure a permit for you to blast fireworks, or you go through an agency that has secured that permit, and those agencies will again communicate where fireworks is going to be blasted in certain designated areas to protect both people, to protect property, to protect the environment as a whole, because the last thing is you want to blast big fireworks at a concert and then some people that are not accustomed to it run into chaos and then you have casualties. So they try to do it in a very, very controlled manner there. So thank you for that. So anyway, that's how the game wrapped up with Manchester City dropping 2 points, which means that Arsenal are now 4 points ahead of them. I do not want to read too much into that. 4 points is quite very thin. In any case, we've seen Arsenal lead that table with a margin of 7 points at 1 point, and it was diminished to 2. So 4 points shouldn't be, whereas it has meaning to it, it's not something to rave about and say, yeah, we are 4 points ahead. If you're an Arsenal fan, I'm sure you, having seen the 7 being reduced to 2, you'll still hold that at the back of your mind that, you know, those points are not one too many. The big question is, can Chelsea force Manchester City to drop more points over the weekend when they meet on Super Sunday? And can you use that? Can you capitalize on that when you meet Bournemouth earlier on? Because previously, Manchester City have been playing earlier than Arsenal, so which put Arsenal to sort of under a bit of pressure to win and maintain their lead at the summits. So in this particular case, Arsenal, for 2 occasions now, after the Aston Villa game and then Bournemouth, they'll be playing earlier than Manchester City. So that gives them the advantage of, you know, win your points. And if they win up after Bournemouth, they can extend that point lead to 7 as they wait for the result between Manchester City against Chelsea. I do not know who will be in charge of Chelsea by then, but whoever is in charge, as an interim, as a permanent, whichever the case will be, by the time we get to Super Sunday, I do not suspect that Chelsea will be different from the Chelsea we observed in the last 6 games, who have only won against Everton, have drawn so many games and lost 2 games against Leeds and Aston Villa. And I think Manchester City have been a little too comfortable at home and blown away teams. The Sunderland that they were drawing against goalless, you know, yesterday, they managed to beat comfortably by 3-0 in the earlier fixture on match day 15 when they met at the Etihad Stadium. So when I look at it that way, I do not feel very encouraged or very positive about Chelsea forcing Manchester City to drop points. In any case, maybe the one takeaway from that is that Manchester City and Chelsea have not yet met this season. So for all games that are going to be played on match day 20 are going to be versus teams that either of them have not faced in the opening 19 games of the season. Because ordinarily, by the time we reach the halfway point of the season, you should have faced each of your opponents at least once. But in this particular case, match day 19 was a replica of match day 15, which meant a reversal of fixtures before, and you saw Unai Emery wondering, how do we get to play Nottingham Forest? How are we playing Arsenal before playing Nottingham Forest? But it's happened before. It's not unique. That's how just the calendar was organized. And yeah, Arsenal will be facing the team that will be facing the only team that beat them home and away last season by 2-0 at the Vitality Stadium and by 2-1 at the Emirates Stadium. Without going too much into it, Arsenal this season have sort of tried to position themselves as a team that has tried to get points off of teams that are cost them points last season. They've not been very successful like 100% successful at it, because last season they won away to Aston Villa by 2-0. This season they got beat by 2-1. Last season they picked up a draw at Anfield in a 2-2 draw. This season they got beat by 1-0. Last season they beat up against Manchester City at home by 5-1. This time around they got a 1-1 draw. So it's not been perfect, but they managed to pick points off Crystal Palace, who beat them last season. It was a 2-2 draw at the Emirates. They managed to beat Everton away. Last season it was a draw. They've managed to beat Tottenham at home. Last season I think it was a draw. And a couple of other teams. Fulham was one of the other fixtures in which they had dropped points away from home. I think it was a draw last season. They managed to win this time around. So Pedri says, trust me, if Manchester City win 1-0 versus Chelsea, they didn't dominate. Sky Sports will say ruthless Manchester City humiliate Chelsea in a beautiful game. Basically, when Manchester City win the hard way, they say, yeah, that's the character of champions. That's how you get the job done. That's how you win a Premier League title. That you do not need to play well to win, and all sorts of superlatives. And yet, when Arsenal do the same, they make it sound, oh, it was edgy. They're not going to get away with that for so long. And you're wondering to yourself, why can't you use the same narrative for Manchester City? But it is what it is. It is what it is. For there, I think it will be Manchester City 4-1 Chelsea. If they play the way they played against Bournemouth, they'll get obliterated. And we'll just have to wait and see. Is it the game that Moises Caicedo is bound to miss through suspension? That doesn't do them any favors. Remember the 6-0 in 2018? Obviously. So, anyways, in the other games, this one I did not watch, but Brentford forced Tottenham in a goalless draw. I thought that Thomas Frank would have conjured a way to beat up against his former team, but they were better than Tottenham in some aspects of the game. Brentford has been one of those teams that has equally been very, very difficult to beat at home. They've been giant killers at the GTEC Stadium. Then Liverpool in a goalless draw against Leeds. This one was equally a bit edgy. Leeds scored one through Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but of course it was offside. Jeremy Frimpong, according to the Premier League website, was voted man of the match. It's a game I latched onto in the final minutes as I arrived home back from running some errands and a hospital to visit somebody. But Liverpool were the better side in terms of ball possession, in terms of shots on goal. They had as many as 19 on target compared to Leeds' 4 on goal and 2 on target. And things like that. XG, which I really do not care much about, even though I always highlight it for the mere statistic that it is. But yeah, so it was dropped points. Crystal Palace in a 1-1 draw against Fulham. That was a perfect score prediction for us here on the channel. Jean-Philippe Mateta, the man of the match, scoring for Crystal Palace in the 39th minute, while Kiani in the 80th minute restored parity for Fulham, who've had a decent run of results in recent times, Fulham. So with all those results that wrapped up match day 19, at halfway point of the season, the implications are that Arsenal lead the table with 45 points. At a similar point last season, I do not remember, possibly, but no, after 18 games last season, Liverpool had 45 points. Arsenal after 19 games this season, they have 45 points. Not so far different from what it was last year, but I hope it goes on to be better for the Arsenal in the second part of the season. But yeah, at least they have 4 wins in a row. Manchester City, the most on-form team, 4 wins and 1 draw. Aston Villa, 4 wins with 1 loss. Both teams inflicting the either losses registered in there. But yeah, Manchester City comes second with 41 points. Aston Villa third with 39 points. Liverpool fourth with 33 points. Chelsea fifth with 30 points, as well as Manchester United in sixth place, 30 points. Sunderland at 29 points in seventh place. Everton 28 points. Brentford ninth with 37 points, as well as the 10th place Crystal Palace and an 11th place Fulham, with Tottenham Hotspur coming 12th with 26 points, as well as a 13th place Newcastle United. Brighton in 14th place have 25 points, while 23 points is for FC Bournemouth in 15th place, who have not won a game since later October. They've had 4 draws out of the last 5 games and 1 loss. So they're not losing too many games, but they are drawing 1 too many. In fact, when you look at Bournemouth's tally of results, they've won 5 games, they've drawn 8 games, they've lost only 6. Leeds United are there in 16th place with 21 points, Nottingham Forest with 18 points in 17th place, while West Ham, following their draw against Brighton and Hove Albion, they do have a point there. Ahewa Honest says, who do you think will be the Chelsea manager? That's what we are going to discuss in a bit, because Liam Rassinia, the manager at their sister club in Strasbourg, has been floated as the most plausible candidate to take on Chelsea there. So Burnley with 12 points and Wolverhampton Wanderers occupy the bottom 3 with 3 points there. Tester says it's a tough position to fill. Chelsea are very hesitant when picking managers. I mean, I don't know what their managerial process is, but Chelsea, like Manchester United, but more to Chelsea's side, do not afford managers a lot of time. When they sign on managers, oftentimes they're thinking, we have a good manager, and they tend to give them long-term contracts. You remember, I think Graham Potter's contract was what, 6 years? He could hardly make it through the first year. Enzo Maresca, 5-year contract with an option to extend it for a further year. He's made it to only 1 year and a half, and he's been shown the pathways. I mean, I understand them being ambitious and making managerial changes to fulfill that effect of ambition, but at some point you ought to give people the time to act, because it's not like managers are inheriting the kind of squad that perhaps Antonio Conte inherited inherited back in 2016, when they went on to win the Premier League title for 2016-2017, that had still had John Terry, that still had Gary Cahill, that had Victor Moses, that had Marcos Alonso, that had Diego Costa, that had Eden Hazard. That's not the kind of team that people are inheriting. Managers in recent times at Chelsea have inherited a squad that was in a process of rebuild, for whom bosses were buying every player that was available on the block or on the stock exchange market for a swap, and hoping that, you can play all those players into a team. At some point, Chelsea had as many as 43 players in their squad. They had about 9 goalkeepers to their roster. And of course, they've tried to change. Jesus says Roman spoiled the Chelsea fans. Tester. Okay, I've read that comment. So really, it's difficult for any manager that works in at Chelsea. Starting from last summer, they tried to improve by narrowing down their squad, let go of many players, the likes of Marcus Bettinelli, George Petrovic, the goalkeeper. But while they were trimming down their squad, they were also making additions. Really, you have players like Raheem Sterling, players like Axel Disasi, that literally nobody wanted to take off Chelsea's hands. You have a Mukalo Modric who's been out through, personal reasons for the anti-doping, violations. You've had a chunk of players in and around the team, and you didn't know what to do with them. But they tried very, very much to trim their squad. During the course of the summer, they let so many players go on loan, and they sold some. The likes of Noni Madueke, Kepa Arrizabalaga going to Arsenal. So Then again, they went and signed, was it Sa? I'm forget Mamadou Sa, the defender from Strasbourg, and then sent him back on loan. You had Andre Santos come to the fold, returning from loan on Strasbourg. Then you have William Estabao. Then you were waiting for Jovan Quenda to join in. Then you're suddenly buying Alejandro Garnacho, who I did not think Chelsea needed. Buying Jamie Gittens, I do not know, has not still proved to be a very smart decision. I'm not saying it won't prove to be. Perhaps he still needs time to acclimatize himself to the Premier League and things like that. But yeah, it's not easy being in that Chelsea dugout. As Chelsea is better than Arsenal. Better in what ways? I've said this before, and I'll still make the same case, that if you're drawing comparisons over the last course of 20 years, Chelsea have been by far the most successful and the better team. 2 UEFA Champions League titles, 2 UEFA Europa League titles, they have 5 Premier League titles to their name, 3 under Jose Mourinho, 1 under Antonio Conte, and another under Carlo Ancelotti. Yeah, that way they've been better, they've been bigger. But in terms of who is a bigger global brand, for me, you cannot draw comparisons. When it comes to success in terms of European success, Premier League success in the last 20, 25 years, yeah, Chelsea have a run at it. They have by far they've been the better side. But historically, for me, I feel Arsenal are still the bigger club in comparison to Chelsea. So I'll leave that at that for your respective opinions on that. But so, yeah, the question is who will take on over the reins at Chelsea from Enzo Maresca after the 2 pathways. Now, I had hoped that Chelsea would resolve their challenges with Enzo Maresca because they felt more personal than professional in a way. It felt like there were disagreements at a personal level and then at a professional level. The part of Enzo Maresca felt like his job was being interfered with. 2, a part of Enzo Maresca felt like he was not being supported well enough. 3, a part of Enzo Maresca felt like certain figures within the club were not supporting the club well enough. And then, I do not think there's any modern day manager that wants to be interrupted in how they run things. What their expectations are is that you let them have the reign on the team, how the team plays, how the team is selected, and how players are disciplined and managed in and around the club. And then you question them when the results are not going their way. That is the expectation of the modern day majority of managers. So he felt at some point this season, particularly prior to their 2-0 victory against Everton, when he came out to say that the previous 48 hours had been the worst in his time at Chelsea. And ever since then, tensions have been building up. But also, another factor that we cannot rule out, as mandated by his contract, in October and in December, he had intimated to Chelsea that he was speaking to people representing Manchester City with the possibility of taking over the role at Manchester City as and of when it may become vacant. So that was also a case. Jesus, is that Swahili? I can't read it the way you put it, but I do not know. It does feel like it's Swahili. So it's a very, very difficult situation, or it would have been a very difficult situation for him to be in as manager. Every time you feel your work is being interfered with, you're not going to be happy. And he decided that the best case scenario was to exit, that they part ways, and Chelsea move on, and he moves on. I do not think Enzo Maresca will find difficult finding a job. However, if he's hoping for the Manchester City job, then he will also be hoping that Pep Guardiola hangs his boots at the end of this season. Because fast forward, if we do get to the summer and Pep Guardiola says he is still in charge at Manchester City, then other teams may come calling. And I do not know if, let's say, Tottenham or Manchester United came calling for Enzo Maresca, he would say no to them, in sort of the hope that he can sit it out and wait for when eventually Pep Guardiola leaves and then he takes on at Manchester City. Niki Swahili. Okay. I did not understand what you said in the previous comment, but going through it, it did feel like it was Swahili. So I think let's not forget Newcastle. Yesterday, Pedro and I were discussing about managers or teams whose jobs are on the line. And he mentioned Newcastle, he added Brighton, for which I disagreed with. Of course, Maresca, we talked about Anna Slot, we talked about Thomas Frank, we talked about Ruben Amorim. So when you assess all those teams, when you look at Liverpool, when you look at Manchester United, when you look at Tottenham Hotspur, when you look at Newcastle, it does feel that Enzo Maresca can work in any of those teams. And that if the respective bosses from those clubs were to call on to him, chances are that he would listen to the call and have discussions. Only time will tell. Like I said, my personal preference would have been that for whichever team that is pondering sacking or parting ways with their manager, particularly with Tottenham Hotspur, Manchester United, Newcastle, and in addition, or Chelsea at the time, and by extension, Liverpool, is that stick with what you have until the end of the season, then assess the season based on the manager's performance vis-a-vis the objectives you set out to achieve, and see if you can find common ground. And if you find that the results are not what you had hoped for or expected, then you make the managerial change, bring in somebody during the course of the summer, let them be part of the recruitment process, let them be part of the team's preseason, let them get to organize the team the way they want it to be organized, and take on the new season. That would be my expectation, So, but according to The Athletic, Liam Rassinia, the manager at Chelsea's sister club in Strasbourg, is the leading contender to replace Enzo Maresca as head coach. Whether that will be on an interim or on a permanent basis, waits to be seen. Oliver Glasner had been floated around, but according to the Athletic sources, he is not under consideration or in contention for the job. But Rassinia is well known by Chelsea's hierarchy, having worked closely with them and impressed during his time at their fellow Blue Coat club in Strasbourg. So that's why he has experience, having managed, I think, at Hull City before going to Strasbourg, where he joined them in 2024. And then, of course, he did work under Wayne Rooney at Derby County as an assistant there. So that's the kind of manager that we are talking about in Liam Rassinia there. So so far, that is the most dominant name making the rounds in regards to who could be Chelsea's next gaffer there. Do some football trivia for videos. Trivia, what do you mean football trivia for videos? Enlighten me on that one. When you say you want some football trivia videos. Give me ideas. Give me ideas. I'm all for embracing ideas. I'm all for embracing ideas. Okay, like name the starting 11 for 2023 Manchester City UEFA Champions League final, or name Real Madrid starting 11 for 2018 UEFA Champions League final. I mean, I could do them, but in real time, I feel that people are just going to Google that information and then paste it in the comment section, you know. But yeah, uh, thank you for the suggestion. We'll look to do some of those. Meanwhile, there are concerns about Declan Rice at Arsenal. We know that he has a knee injury. We know he has a knee injury, and his knee was swollen in the aftermath of that game against Brighton, and that's how he missed the game against Aston Villa. Now, there's a short video clip trending online where Declan Rice is having a conversation with Aston Villa's Morgan Rogers and signaling to him that his knee was swollen, and he appeared to be saying, "My knee is just the F word," which, and he goes on to say, it's terrible. At least from the lip sync readers, that's what they did say. But Arsenal will be hoping that it's not as bad as it seems. But I do not think he will be back in time. He doesn't want to. Arsenal will be hoping that it's not as bad as it seems. Really. Anyways, so quickly, let's wrap this up with some transfer news. Crystal Palace did agree a £33.5 million deal for the transfer of Brennan Johnson from Tottenham Hotspurs. Second part of medical has been completed, and the player is set to sign all the paperwork today to join Crystal Palace. Bournemouth and Everton were the other teams that were interested in signing him. So that's that. Then also there's West Ham also in the markets. West Ham did sign Castellanos. That deal is complete or is a done deal for 29 million euros from Lazio. West Ham, I don't know. You feel that they are short on quality in some departments, and yeah. And then, anyways, that's like the most important news when it comes to transfers. Then Aston Villa did confirm the signing of 19-year Brazilian winger Alisson, as they signed him from Gremio for 10 million euros plus 2 million euros in expected add-ons. So that deal is equally complete. So let's wait and see. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure doing this with you. Thank you so much, Jesus. Thank you so much, Pedri. Thank you so much, Ahewa. Thank you so much, Tester of Life, and every single one of you that has been part of this morning broadcast. I wish you a blessed New Year. Continue enjoying the start of the New Year. It's a Friday. That means we are heading into the weekend. There's action tonight in the Spanish La Liga, in the Italian Serie A, where you have, I think, AC Milan up against Cagliari. So do not miss out on that action. It should be coming your way in case you're interested in watching it. You say, wait, Jesus says, please play trivia games. We'll play them. I'll think of ideas and then we'll play them. I'll be putting out a question at every start of the broadcast, and then we'll take it from there. Otherwise, stay blessed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye for now.